This Christmas may not turn out to be a merry one for Uday Kotak, promoter of Kotak Mahindra Bank. The Bombay High Court has refused to stay Reserve Bank's December 31st deadline for the bank to trim its promoter shareholding to 20% of paid-up capital. Remember, Kotak Mahindra Bank had moved the Bombay High Court against the Reserve Bank earlier this month after the central bank told the bank that Uday Kotak reducing his promoter stake via the issue of preference shares doesn't meet its requirements. So where does this verdict leave Uday Kotak? Where does it leave Kotak Mahindra Bank? Is there room for more legal options, or is there room for negotiation with the Reserve Bank to be able to see whether there can be another middle ground? We discuss all this and more with our guests, Janmejaya Sinha, Chairman Asia Pacific at the Boston Consulting Group. Also with us is Mr. R. Gandhi, former Deputy Governor, Reserve Bank of India, and Sandeep Parekh. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Well, let me come to you, Mr. Sinha, first. More in terms of what are the practical options for Kotak. Was it wrong to have gone to court first? Would it have made more sense to negotiate with the central bank?
I cannot imagine that Kotak Bank would have gone to court lightly. I just don't believe that. I think they must have tried to, talk to RBI as many times as they could. Because, no regulated entity wants to take its regulator to court. It must be a tight bind that they are in, and one has to look at it from 3 or 4 perspectives and then decide how to look at it. What was it that they were allowed to do what was their original licensing agreement that they had got? Second is what is fair? And third is what is possible. Just going and offloading 10% of stake in 10 days is not straightforward. So, and then the question is it a good bank or is it a bad bank? Is it being well run or is it a threat to the
One minute, Mr. Sinha.
I would actually look...
They did not have to offload 10% in 10 days. They knew this was coming for the last 2 years. And of course, valuations have been going through the roof. So with each passing day, it was becoming a larger amount of money, to be sure. The argument of whether it is fair is another one, and I thought I will come to it in a bit. But basically, do you think Kotak should have seen this coming, or did he bank on the fact that earlier, 10 years ago, bank promoters regularly got extension, so he thought that he will also get one?
So, a precedent is an important thing to look at. What was his original licensing norm? Was it 49 or was it 20 or was it 10? Yeah. When was it changed? What was the wording? When there is a lot which I have read in the newspapers that RBI said it was not in the spirit of the law. Actually, the actual wording of the letter that he had got was different from what was then later expected.
Yeah.
When you are dealing in these things, you have to be tight, So I would not like to, speculate. If you are asked to do something, you will follow the letter of that that law. Then you say it's against the spirit, when actually there are many regimes in place. You will get confused. So it could, on the other hand, it's also true that for a long time there has been a movement towards getting to the final destination. But then you have to make the destination clear.
Yeah.
And if any of them are not as clear as they can be, the person has a right to feel aggrieved. Because I don't believe any bank would like to take the regulator to court. It is not done lightly. Okay. You're going to live every day with that regulator. So who takes the regulator to court?
Fair point. Fair point. I take a point over there. And there is, of course, a change in the Reserve Bank's wording. Clearly, in the license condition, they have said paid up capital. And when I read the guidelines for licensing of new banks in the private sector, February 2013, there at every point they are speaking about shareholding and not about paid up equity. Likewise, when you look at the master direction ownership in private sector banks, 2016, May 2016, again over there in the master direction, at all points it is shareholding that is being referred to in the language of the law. But this is not the case in the decade of the 2000s when fit and proper was discussed. It was paid up equity that the Reserve Bank was talking about, and perhaps, as Kotak says, said on record, in his license condition, it was paid up capital. But now where does this leave him legally? Sandeep, what's your sense? Can there be any special leave petition, any legal option available? Or is Kotak Mahindra Bank clearly violating the law as of Jan 1st, 2019?
So, Latha, whether they're violating the law or not, that's the secondary question right now. I think we need to look at tactics rather than the strategy, long-term strategy. And that's critical because they need to finish something before the 31st of December or stand in compliance. It's in violation of the law as the RBI understands it. Now, they can do two things. Either they can go down, which means they can go to the RBI and kind of plead with them and say that give us 3 more months to comply. We're willing to withdraw the writ. Again, I'm talking legal strategy. I'm not talking about grand principles of, whether it's capital or voting shares.
Correct.
Or they can move up and say that, okay, the High Court should have given us a stay. We'll go to a larger bench or go to the Supreme Court, etc.
Okay.
The problem is going up in appeal is that, again, usually there's a principle of judicial deference later, which means they normally do not get into the merits of the case. They look at whether there's perversity, bias, illegality, and the like. So normally they say, okay, we have an expert regulator that knows what it's doing, and we will normally not like to interfere.
Okay.
That's the final ruling. So,
but it's amazing. It's amazing. Kotak did not think that this could be one of the, verdicts of the court that they will not grant a stay. You should have given it more than a 50% chance, shouldn't you?
Not just more than 50% chance, but also, given the short time frame, if they had 6 months or 8 months, it was probably worth a gamble to fight with the regulator. But I think this was really cutting it short because it's, and remember, this is Christmas in the West. Investors are not going to pick up your calls right now. So it's going to be a tough journey for the next few weeks for Kotak.
Okay. Mr. Gandhi, can you live in violation of the law? Because in the Bandhan Bank case, the bank is already in violation, and therefore it has been meted out a punishment that starting December 31st, I think, they cannot open new branches and the managing director's salary cannot be increased. Can Kotak proceed on the assumption that their penalty will be similar and they will work with that penalty? They will be able to manage probably with electronic banking up to a point. By then, they will find people to sell their shares to. So what if you live in violation for a few months? Is that an option?
That's what I think Mr. Kotak and Kotak Mahindra Bank must have factored in the sense that when you cross the line of the debt line, you are liable for regulatory action. Regulatory action need not necessarily be exactly what has been prescribed for the Bandhan Bank. It could be different. So that one should not straight away carry that exactly will apply here. But regulatory penalties will be there. That if Kotak Bank has thought that is a reasonable cost that we may have to pay until we actually comply with the instruction, that could be a possibility. That could be a strategy also. Not only strategy, that's what will be happening now. That's by 31st December, and even theoretically, before 31st December also, they can do something. We do not know what all the efforts Kotak Bank is making to comply with the instruction. Another 10 days are there.
You mean they can find a buyer? They can find a buyer for the shares, you think?
Yeah, because 10 days are there. So even otherwise, I would presume that they must be negotiating with several people. If something clicks because of that, then that is also a compliance. Okay. So theoretically, there are very many possibilities. You can comply with before 31st. You can live with penalties immediately thereafter until you actually comply. So that's what I think. That's what
they must be counting on. That this may be the penalty. So there are 2 or 3 options. They could be still talking to investors, or they could be willing to live with a Bandhan Bank-like penalty for some time. Though, of course, there's no guarantee that it will be the same penalty. On that issue, Sandeep, the Kotak Bank's position has been off the record when they speak to us that we are the regulated entity. A promoter is not an entity regulated by the Reserve Bank. So technically, RBI can't tell the promoter you bring down your stake. He can tell Kotak Mahindra Bank, you have to arrange your capital in such a way that no promoter owns more than 30%. But that is a killer condition for Kotak Mahindra Bank. They have 2.3 crore shares outstanding. If they have to bring Uday Kotak's stake down from 30% to 10%, they have to issue 1 lakh shares, 1 crore shares more. Now, that will be, 50% more equity has to be raised, which works out about 1 lakh crore. Is that an option at all for the bank?
See, Latha, again, as you said, this is not a 10-day scenario. They knew to do either of the two things. And there's a possibility also, which needs to be kept in mind, which is M&A. They did one big M&A a couple of years back. So M&A was possible. Stake dilution by way of issue to new investors, possible sale by the current promoter. So there are multiple permutations, combinations which are possible. So to say that they have a gun at their head in the last 10 days is, I don't think, fair. But having said that, I still think that the bigger picture, RBI does need to rethink. First of all, they need to improve their drafting skills. And secondly, they need to rethink whether fragmented shareholding is a panacea, which they're claiming it is. Because, we've seen big issues with large private banks where there is fragmented shareholding. So I'm not sure it's kind of a destination, kind of an be-all destination which RBI is looking at.
I take your point entirely. And with that, let's take a break and come back and discuss this broader issue. Does Reserve Bank, not for Kotak Bank's sake, but for the sake of the banking sector itself, need to reconsider its conditions on promoter shareholding? Should it only look at fit and proper? And if a promoter is fit and proper, why is 21% dangerous and why is 20% safe? Does that question need to be asked? And do you think if we proceed in this fashion, we are going to find fewer and fewer Indian shareholders and more foreign shareholders of Indian banks? That question to my panel in a minute after this break.